Hey everyone, and Happy New Year! So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing another upcoming ship, and one that people have been waiting for a while, which is the Constellation Taurus. The Taurus is an interesting one because it's just a variant of a ship that's already in the game, so we already have a lot of information about how it might perform, but we've still been waiting for it for a while. Also, since ships usually get a price increase when they go flyable, you might want to make your decision on whether or not you want this ship sooner rather than later. Before we get started though, I just want to remind you that I recently started up a Discord and we're going to be trying to group up and take out some Idrises tomorrow. So if you want to join in on that, or if you just want to find some people to play the game with, then be sure to join. So I'm sure you all have seen the new roadmap and have taken a look at all of the exciting things that might be coming to Star Citizen this year, but one that caught my eye was the Constellation Taurus is a deliverable for the vehicle content and it's scheduled to be worked on quite soon. Now it's not on the roadmap for 3.13, so it seems like they're not completely confident they'll be able to get it into that patch, but it's being worked on during the same time frame as the C2 Hercules, which will be in a 3.13.x patch I believe, so there's a chance we'll be seeing it quite soon. But even if it's delayed a bit, there's still a good chance we'll get it this year. Of course, this is Star Citizen, so nothing's a guarantee, but especially since they're already also working on getting the Snub Fighter docking working for the rest of the Connie variants, I wouldn't be too surprised to see the Taurus sooner rather than later. And like I mentioned earlier, this ship will probably get a slight price bump once it's actually flyable, so you might want to make your decision on whether or not you want it before that happens. One thing you can do is you can even just grab a $10 CCU from the Hornet Tracker or Ballista if you just want to wait and see, but even if you don't, the price bump shouldn't be too much, so it's not a bad option to just wait and see what the ship is like either. Now I want to talk about reasons you might want this ship. And just as a disclaimer, I'm personally kind of excited for this ship, so don't let me influence you too much. Starting off, the whole Constellation series is actually pretty good at combat, and if you're only talking about PvE combat, it's actually really good at it. With 4 gimbaled size 4 pilot-controlled weapons, you have a lot of firepower as a solo pilot with this ship. And in addition to that, you get a ton of small but still somewhat effective missiles, and if you bring a crewmate along, you have more firepower in the form of a manned turret. Now the Taurus, being the cargo variant of the Constellation, only has the bottom turret, I believe, where the other models besides the Aquila have 2, but these turrets only have size 2 weapons, so they don't add all that much besides a slight fighter deterrent, so you're not missing out on all that much with the Taurus only having 1 turret. Another thing that the Taurus lacks is the Parasite Snub Fighter that all of the other variants have, and it trades that out for more cargo capacity. While a snub is definitely a cool thing to have, and I think is one of the coolest features of the Constellation series, I still agree with this trade-off because the Taurus is meant to be a hauler, and this rear area that's dedicated to the Merlin or Archimedes' docking collar is actually quite large, and you could probably fit a decent amount of cargo in here if this were all cargo lift. I agree with the rest of these trade-offs as well, because for one, bringing along the crew that's needed to be able to use all the bells and whistles on the other Constellation variants would heavily cut into your profits and only give you a marginal firepower boost. If you want to fully crew an Andromeda, you need the 2 turret gunners, a snub pilot, and possibly a co-pilot. So that's a lot of people to be bringing along on trade runs, and you probably wouldn't do that anyway, so not having those features isn't that big of a deal. Also, like I mentioned earlier, at least for now these turrets only give you a marginal firepower benefit, and the snub, while being useful in a combat situation, might not be useful if you're a trader and you're trying to run from an attacker, because since the snub doesn't have its own quantum drive, you'd have to let it undock and then redock again before you make your escape, which might be more trouble than it's worth if you're being pursued. So even though a fully manned Andromeda should be quite effective once they get the shield holes fixed, most of the firepower comes from those pilot-controlled guns, which you still have on the Taurus, so you still will be able to shoot yourself out of a lot of situations with the Taurus. Even if the Taurus is lacking the missiles as well, I still think it'll have plenty of firepower for a cargo ship, and the trade-offs made to get it down to an affordable price and to have more cargo capacity will be worth it. Just look at all the space that these missiles take up in the interior. So yeah, even if all this ship ends up having is the pilot-controlled weapons and that 1 turret, it'll still be able to do a lot of combat missions, which is some versatility that's nice to have, and that you don't really find in the larger cargo-focused ships. So that brings me to my next positive about this ship, which is I think that it's in a kind of a sweet spot in terms of size and capability. It's a bit bigger than both the Cutlass and Freelancer, both of which are fan favorites, but for that size you'll get a lot more firepower than either of those, and most likely more cargo capacity than even the Freelancer Max, although that's just my speculation. The Freelancer Max holds 122 SCU, and the Constellation Andromeda already holds 96, so I would hope the cargo variant would get a bump of more than 26 SCU, which would be enough to put it over the Freelancer Max. Whatever the case is, these ships are a nice size because you can just do a lot of things with them. Once you step up to something bigger like the Caterpillar, you do get more cargo capability, but you also miss out on a lot of convenience, and depending on how the game continues to evolve, there will likely be a lot of trade routes where a slightly smaller ship like the Taurus is better. In the past, they've talked about how there will be different sizes of jump points, and the smaller ones will only be able to accommodate smaller ships. Now, the Freelancer Max has often been pointed at as one of the ships with the highest cargo capacity that will still be able to fit through the smallest of these jump points, but the Taurus might just squeeze in there with it as well. If it doesn't though, it probably will still be able to fit through smaller jump points than something like the Cat, and once they finish balancing its atmospheric flight to reflect the fact that it does have VTOL fans, it'll be more nimble in atmosphere, which will help it out in a lot of trade routes. So because of factors like that, I think medium-sized haulers like the Taurus will always have a place in any trade operation, so you'll probably always have a job with this ship. But because of its size, it can make sense to use for lots of other things as well. I already mentioned the combat potential of this ship, but there's plenty of other things you might use it for, like hauling around a rock or two. Depending on how much bigger the cargo bay is on the Taurus, it might be a great ship for a pilot to fly around 2 or 3 rock miners once they fix the cargo bay so that it works nicely with vehicles. But that many miners in one ship would be quite profitable in the game's current state. Also, since the ship isn't too big, it shouldn't be too expensive to run, so you should be fine using it for your daily travels around the verse. I wouldn't really want to bring out my Caterpillar just to take a trip over to Wally's Bar on microTech, but the Constellation handles this sort of general use just fine. One last thing I wanted to mention is one of the advertised features of the Taurus, the security hold that supposedly will shield some of your cargo from scans. We don't really have a good idea of how this will work yet, because even though ships like the Star Runner already supposedly have shielded cargo, the shielding aspect hasn't really been implemented yet, so it just behaves like a normal cargo bay for now. However, this shielded hold could make the Taurus a great smuggling ship, and I think it would rival the Star Runner in smuggling capability, at least for some situations, because what the Constellation lacks in speed, it makes up for in firepower. I have been being really positive about the Constellations, but the Connies, in their current form, definitely do have downsides. So some of the things to be aware of are that they are kind of unstable when landing and will often faceplant because they only have rear landing gear. They are not that maneuverable right now, although this has been getting improved. Their engines can be shot off pretty easily right now, although this will be improved once the shields work correctly. And the cockpit view on all the Constellations leaves quite a bit to be desired with all of the struts that are in your way. I'm sure there's more flaws that I'm not remembering, but I personally use the Constellations pretty often, so they all can be worked around in some way, but they're definitely not perfect ships. So overall, I don't think you can go wrong with the Constellation Taurus, since it seems like it'll have a nice mix of capabilities and will probably be quite the capable ship for the price. Let me know you guys' thoughts on this ship though, and just the Constellations in general. Are you excited to finally see the Taurus in game, or do you not care about it at this point? I do think they still need a bit of work in general, especially in the shield hole department, but they've been getting better patch by patch, and I personally just like their versatility. They're good solo and also with a crew, and you can do a bit of everything with them, but I guess I'm a little biased because the Taurus is one of the ships I pledged for. Anyway, that's all I have for this video, so please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Also, go ahead and join the Discord if you want to try out the Idris mission tomorrow, or if you just want to find some crewmates in the verse. Thanks for watching.